SHINKYU's self-defense syllabus for both our karate and combat styles has been carefully formulated as a result of countless of hours of study into the habitual acts of violence to make sure that you are ready and you're prepared with reliable and practical skills for all the most likely situations that you're going to encounter. In order to develop our self-defense syllabus, we looked far beyond our karate background, exploring judo and jiu-jitsu, adopting techniques from Krav Maga and kickboxing and mixed martial arts, and there's even a little bit of Aikido in our self-defense syllabus. And this makes sure what we teach you is cutting edge and prepares you with practical and reliable, simple and effective skills. We adopted a set of 9 principles or tests to make sure what we teach you stands up to the rigors of a real-life self-defense situation. Principle number 1 is simplicity. Self-defense must be simple. If it has too many parts or too many stages, what happens is students may forget it under the stress and duress of a situation, but also too, if its self-defense is too complex, has too many different moving variables, it can become unreliable, especially when one part or the next stage relies on the previous stage being effective. In order to explain the principle of simplicity, I'm just going to demonstrate a handful of wrist grab defenses. Now there are dozens of different ways you can get out of a wrist grab. For example, if Gabby grabs me right hand to right hand, I can counter grab her hand here, counter grab here. I want to create a nice bend here, a wrist lock here, make sure our arm is bent, and now from here I can roll her hand over, and that wrist lock was quite painful. I can bring her to her knees very, very quickly. And as effective as that is, it's a little bit too complex. First of all, from here it relies on me getting certain positions and certain holds, making sure I've counter grabbed her in the exact right way. And if she does things like bring her elbow up or straighten her wrist from here, then this isn't going to work. But more importantly, a wrist grab self-defense has to work for both hands. If I was to grab Gabby from here right to left, then the whole principles of the previous defense I showed you with the locking of the wrist just won't work for this opposite hand. And more importantly, for women and children, it's most likely that they're going to grab you right hand to your left hand. And they will also grab you in a variety of different grips as well. So whatever self-defense you teach has to be simple enough that you don't have to stop and think, hey, wait a second, are they grabbing me right to right, left to right? Is it an upwards grip or a downwards grip? Whatever you learn has to work for all situations, so you don't have to think about it. It's got to be quick, simple, and effective. Principle number 2, self-defenses, within reason, must work against a bigger, stronger opponent. I recently saw a self-defense video where they recommended from here that you should use double hammer fists if someone grabs your lapels. And if someone's much bigger and stronger than you, that just doesn't work. So for example, I grab Gabby here, all it does is it makes me bend my arms a little bit. If we go for a much simpler response of simply using your stance to pull them offline, from here forming a good strong platform and then striking weak and soft targets of the body, it's a much more simple technique, but more importantly, it will work even if against a larger opponent because you're using your body weight, not just your arms, and also to the soft targets. It doesn't matter that you're not quite as strong as your opponent from here by hitting soft targets like the throat, from here in the groin, it'll be highly effective. Let's see. Principle number 3 is to use appropriate compliance or pre-release techniques as part of the self-defense. Now, what are compliance and pre-release techniques? Well, compliance techniques are techniques that cause your opponent pain and make them want to move in a certain way that will make it easier for you to escape. And pre-release techniques, in a very, very similar vein, are techniques you would use to distract your opponent and take their mind off what you're going to do to escape. So a great example of the use of compliance and pre-release techniques is in a strangulation self-defense. So if I grab Gabby here and I'm trying to strangle her, obviously, by striking me in the throat both moves my arms away, which weakens my grip, and more importantly, because my throat's recoiling back, I probably will let go even just with a throat strike. If she doesn't choose to use compliance or pre-release techniques, she might really struggle to break free, especially if my arms are bent and I'm really wringing her neck. So here, so if you're going to use any pre-release or compliance techniques, they must really be against vulnerable parts of the body that are guaranteed to create a physiological response. For example, if you kick someone in the groin, they are going to bend over. I can from here stomach someone scraping their heel down my shin from here, or even someone stomping my foot. But a good square-on kick to the groin, sometimes some groin attacks aren't as effective as we like, but if it's a good square attack, then guess what? It's going to crumple me in half. Equally, throat is a really great place to attack. From here, I find it very hard to resist someone poking me in the throat, and also too, of course, the eyes cause a massive knee-jerk reaction. So those are the kinds of techniques that you should be relying on, but make sure whatever you use causes that level of physiological response. Principle number 4 is that you must take into account the emotional state of your attacker and their motivation, and how that might affect their determination and persistence in the attack, and also too their pain thresholds. So often I see martial arts instructors run through self-defenses, which will work when it's all compliant and everyone's being nice in the dojo, but a real attacker is going to be much more violent, much stronger. And the classic example of what I've often seen taught in martial arts schools is that children are advised to stomp on the heels, or on the shins I should say, on the tops of feet of their attacker. There are lots of reasons why this won't work, some of which I'm going to cover later in this video, but on a pain threshold level, realistically, a child trying to hurt a motivated attacker probably isn't going to work. Someone who grabs a child, a pedophile who's trying to grab a child, they are highly motivated and highly committed. They know what the consequences are if they get caught. And they're not going to go, if they grab a child from behind and your child runs their foot down their shins with the child's weight and the child's strength, it's not going to cause enough damage for them to go, oh, ow, ow, here. So even if I was to grab Gabby here from behind, who is much bigger and stronger than your average child, she'll really struggle to cause enough pain and injury. And I'm also going to stop and stand still to make it easy for her to aim and get on target. Principle number 5 is that self-defenses must take into account the likely movement of the attacker. So often martial artists assume that the attacker is going to stay still. This drives me absolutely wild. Just for example, if I grab Gabby from behind, if I grab her from behind like this, I'm not going to be standing here waiting for her to kick me in the shin, even if that did work, which we've just proved it doesn't. But I'm not going to be waiting here for that. I'm going to be yanking her strongly from behind. And now, if I yank her strongly from behind, let's see how successful she is at trying to kick my shins as I'm grabbing her from behind. So, any defense you have must take into account the likely movement of the attacker. The other thing I hope you can see from that is that I lifted Gabby a little bit, which obviously gives her a lot less leverage to make those shin kicks work. Another classic defense for a very similar attack is to drop down and to do a shoulder throw from here. But again, and that's often taught from here as a defense as well for a rear naked choke. But again, the moment I start moving backwards, she'll never be able to pull it off. So whatever self-defense you choose, it must take into account the movement of your attacker. In this case, when I grab Gabby from behind, I'm most likely to be dragging her back. So another key part of principle number 5 is that your attacker is also probably going to have follow-up techniques. So say for example, if they're grabbing you, they're probably grabbing you so they can hit you. Often I see people in martial artists teach defenses where someone grabs them and they're concerned. This is how you break free. If someone grabs your wrist, from here you're going to twist their arm over and do all this kind of stuff to them. And aside from being a little bit unreliable and a little bit complex, requiring some fine motor skills when you're in a really stressful situation, it doesn't take into the fact that when I grab you, from here I'm going to grab and shut you, and I'm going to start punching you really vigorously straight away. If you're trying to do this while I'm going bang, good luck with that. So whatever you do, your defense has got to take into account the fact that they've got follow-up techniques. It may not but just be a grab on its own. Principle number 6. Defenses should start at the position of your natural reaction. So often in self-defense situations, the attack will come as a little bit of a surprise. It may take you a second or two to get it in your head of how you're going to defend. And in that moment, you're going to react very, very naturally to how you've been attacked. Obviously, there are some times when you'll see your assailant coming and you can pre-prepare a much more planned out and maybe even counterintuitive type of technique. But often from here, you'll find yourself having to realize that you're in a self-defense situation and you'll need to start from that position. Principle number 7 is very much along the same lines as principle number 6. What principle number 7 is that if you learn a defense which assumes that you're going to be ready for an attack, you should also learn a defense that presumes that you are also not going to be ready, and that's going to come as a complete surprise attack. So often I see different instructors, different martial arts running through a self-defense situation, but of course their students know exactly what's going to happen and when, and their attacker is being compliant and predictable. But of course, in reality, self-defense won't be predictable in the slightest, and very, very often attacks will come as a complete surprise to you. So the classic example of this is when someone's trying to pick a fight and throw punches. So in a lot of cases, there'll be some animosity, there'll be a confrontation or an argument beforehand, and she'll be very, very well aware that I'm going to be a threat. From here I'll be coming out of this, and she'll obviously form her defense, and when I actually do come to hit her, she'll be ready to burst forwards and take me out. But what happens if she's not ready? So if she was turning away and she was, or maybe if I sucker punched her or just blindsided her, she's going to have a much more reactive defense. So rather than being able to be ready and bursting forwards, she's going to pull back from here, block and strike, etc. Also included in that principle, you've got to be ready for the fact that in some self-defense situations, the first thing that you'll know about being in a self-defense situation is that you're being hit and hurt, or maybe the first thing you'll know is that you've already been caught in a headlock or a grab. So you must be ready for that eventuality. You must be ready for things to catch you completely by surprise. Principle number 8 is that you must be ready to do appropriate follow-up techniques in order to ensure that your attacker is no longer a threat to you. I see this so often taught incorrectly from here, or just completely with self-defense taught in complete absence of this principle, where an attacker is where you learn how to break free from attacker, and after you break free, you just assume everything's fine and they're not going to attack you again, and you just walk off into the sunset. That's not going to happen. If you break free from someone, guess what? They're going to attack you again. They haven't stopped being motivated, especially if it's just been an escape. Once you escape, they're going to attack you again. So make sure that before they even have the chance, is that after you break free, you're using appropriate techniques to follow up and incapacitate your attacker. And this is where it's really important to teach your students when it's appropriate to run as well. So often I see martial arts instructors blanket give the advice, you should run. That is not the best advice. Even after you break free or at the start of a self-defense situation, you've got to consider who is attacking you. If you break free from a young male adult and you choose to run straight after that, then guess what? They're going to chase you, and because they're most likely going to be very fast, depending on your physiology and how fast you can run, they're probably going to catch you. So, and it also depends on what obstacles are in the way as well. If you have to go through a bedroom door which opens inwards, by the time you run up to the door, grab the handle and fumble with the handle because you're probably going to be under stress, turn the knob, pull the door back open to you, and then re-accelerate through the door. Do you think the guy is going to from here jump back up and grab you in the time that you do that? We've actually done tests, and absolutely, even if you've knocked them down, they'll have time to get back up and grab you. You must think about doing appropriate follow-up techniques to make sure that your attacker is incapacitated before you try and escape or run. So often people learn how to break free, but then they don't think about what's going to happen next. But if Gabby attacks me back, so immediately as she breaks free, she starts her own campaign of attack and makes sure she incapacitates me, we'll see what the results are now. Principle number 9 is defenses must be appropriate to the threat. And there are lots of factors that determine what's appropriate. First of all, who is attacking you, and also where you're being attacked and what attack they're actually doing to you. Obviously, if something's life-threatening, then you should do everything in your power to defend yourself. But there are plenty of grey areas. First of all, if you're a school child, what you do at school, you're probably going to try to escape from someone rather than punching and kicking people. Also, too, you've got to work on the principle of escalation. So say, for example, if I was a guy that was being a bit handsy, I often see people go, oh yeah, what you should do is you should knee that guy in the groin. Well, you're going to escalate that situation into full-on violence. And if they're drunk, they may choose to try and punch and kick you back because you've really hurt them. So obviously, in those kinds of situations, you might need to choose still sending a strong message that you're not interested, but a much more passive approach to that self-defense situation. So it's really important that you choose self-defenses that are appropriate, not overdoing it and escalating situations and unnecessarily being violent, and also too, not being strong enough in situations where it is in fact very, very dangerous and strong violence is actually required. So in summary, it's really important you look at all of these tests. If you see a technique that blatantly breaks some of these rules, you've got to really assess it for its merits.